for renewal and revival in the life of your church and in ministry to all your world. Bless the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts. Might it be pleasing in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Friends, I don't want to confess any sins of the church, but I want to share a story that really only I can tell. I had asked my wife and family to trust me as I went down this road to answering the call into ministry. And there's a two-step process at the end, kind of your boards, so to speak. And I went for a group of my peers now to be examined on my theology at the beginning, and they found it in some ways insufficient. And I was returned, and I was devastated. I knew that I would be in some way serving God's church in pastoral ministry, but I did not know whether it was going to remain in the United Methodist Church, because the reasons that they gave me for their rejection of me didn't hold water. They said that they were returning me because I had spelling errors in my paperwork and was not thorough enough. They told me that my theology of atonement, how Jesus' death on the cross changes the perspective of humanity, was incomplete. So I sent my paperwork to a copyright editor of the magazine to check my spelling and grammar. She found 3 errors in volumes of paperwork. Certainly not the 28, 29 that I've been led to believe. And I sent my paperwork to the head of the theology department at my seminary with a woman who's respected across the denomination as one of our scholars. I really struggled with whether or not I should go back. But God was still using me, and the United Methodist Church had still nourished me into the faith, and my family as well, and so I went back again. And it became clear to me that there was a division in the room at the onset of our discussions together. And it really had nothing to do with me. At the end of our conversation together, they prayed about whether or not I was ready, and they accepted me. And a gentleman leaned forward from the group who had led the conversation the year before and had disagreed with my theology. And he said, you know, over these next 2 years of practice to your final interview, there's some things we want you to work on. It appears that you have some ideas, some concepts, some beliefs that we might term traditional or conservative. Evangelical is the word he used. And then there are some ideas that would seem progressive and, well, contemporary, and we feel that those values are in conflict with each other, and so over this next 2 years I want you to work on that. And I looked around the room of 8 to 10 people sitting there, and someone in the room said, that's not our feedback, that's his feedback. And I said to him, you know, I really don't know what to do with that. I really don't know how to put legs on that idea. So I would need some help for you to define for me what is evangelical and what is liberal or progressive. And And looking amongst his peers that had already kind of called him out, he said, you know. And I said, let me take a stab at this. So one of my beliefs is that God has revealed himself uniquely through this book we call the Bible. That it not only defines for us the ways in which we should live in our relationship with God, it also speaks to us when we read it through the power of the Holy Spirit. I hold this in high authority in my life. And some people might call that evangelical. Yes, you're right. I have a heart for the last, the lost, and the least. I believe that we are called to make a difference in this world and to give because we have been given. And that the gospel is a gospel of social justice and reform. That the Christian community, through its periods and histories, has actually made a change in the world and continues to make a change in the world for the better. And some people might call that progressive. And he said, yes. Are those the two values you think are in conflict with each other? Because John Wesley thought the same thing. And someone at the table laughed and said, he got you there. And I said, stop. No, I'm a candidate still, right? I said, we're tired in the church of you telling us what we should believe and what we should do. You should reflect the very best of who we are. And I'm not here to get you. But I am here to say we're tired. We're tired of being labeled. We're tired of being told, you have to believe this, but you can't believe that. You've parsed and parceled out the gospel in a way that doesn't even look familiar to us anymore. Stop. Because far more than one of our founders in John Wesley, the one whom this book is all about, did the same thing. He held to the traditions of the faith, but put them into mission and ministry to serve the world. We live in a world that is divisive to a way that, especially after this past week, we can't even comprehend. And I'm not going there. But I am here to tell you that our faith is not up to be ransomed by one group or another to tell us what we should believe and how we should live. And our author tells us this today. The writer of the book of Hebrews says, it's impossible to restore people to changed hearts and lives who turn away once they have seen the light, tested the heavenly gift, become partners in the Holy Spirit. Once we have truly accepted the gift of grace in God, we must be changed people. We can't live lives of continuing desperation and doubt. We can no longer place strings or conditions upon our life, in our participation, and our attitude, and our approach in all endeavors. We can't say, well, I get to do this because you got to understand how I'm hurt. You got to understand what's been done to me. We throw off the belief that we are inadequate because of what we have done. Because of the scripts of what people have told us. And we are found anew as God's beloved, beautiful creation. and you'd entered on a journey together with the divine. I remember my moment. I asked God one thing. Don't ever let me forget how I feel right now. The writer of Hebrews is saying, once your heart has been changed, how can you not? How can you not look at the world as one of blessing after blessing after blessing, of opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to represent or re-express or represent the very God who loves you so much, He died on a cross for you? How could you turn away and back to a life that says, but wait a minute, what about me? A different form of the Me Too movement. Sorry. These things just come to me. But we live in a world where we're constantly asking the question, what about me? What's in it for us? I don't understand. This book has a message. You are beloved. It has another message. It's not about you.
Amen. Amen.
Why can't we fathom that? Why can't we stop looking for the issues that divide us, separate us, places of disagreement? When is it more important to be evangelical or progressive than it is to be Christian? When is it more important for us to be Republican, Democratic, or independent than it is for us to be American? When is it more important for us to be privileged or disprivileged than it is to be God's creation and humanity across the world? Why do we try to divide the church, the world, our community into winners and losers? How can we ignore the needs of other people when our needs are met? And what excuse would there be for us to not live fully out of the gospel that God calls us to live? Oh, but Pastor, you don't understand. I'm tired. I'm tired too. There's no such thing in the church as, I've done my time, I can now sit. Paul goes to his dying days, serving the building up of the church, no matter what. Even if there's nothing more that he can do than write letters of encouragement from his imprisonment and doom and death coming. But you don't understand, Pastor. The reality is that service ministries are all reporting lower and lower and lower amounts of volunteerism. It's as though we've given up serving Jesus. The ground receives a blessing from God and it drinks it up. That regularly comes and fails and falls on it, and it yields a useful crop, but it also produces thorns and thistles. He's saying a day of judgment is coming. Will we be a useful crop or thorns and thistles? Paul, in his wonderful way, he's not the writer of Hebrews, we don't believe, but Paul says this in other places. The writer says, but we are convinced of better things in your case, brothers and sisters. You're not like the thorns and thistles. God is unjust so that he forgets your efforts and your love have been shown for his name's sake when you served and continue to serve God's holy people. I could read this book all I want, but if I don't do anything about it, what good is the knowledge I've gained? Like anything, faith in action is faith. Faith in the mind is useless. If I'm not allowing the gospel to transform me and inform me, if I spend my time looking for the parts that I feel comfortable with and skipping the parts that make me uncomfortable, then who am I? I've just attached strings to the message. But I'm hearing in the church there are people who are disappointed in me. They're unhappy with some of the decisions I've made as your spiritual leader. One this week even went so far as to say they're going somewhere else because I changed the worship times. But I've had others who feel unappreciated or unrecognized, and I acknowledge my stoicness at times. He is a stark contrast to Lori, and it's a difficult adjustment. Let me ask you a favor. Stop serving your pastor. Stop serving your church. Stop serving your family. And serve God. Do it not as a favor. Do it in response. Do it because in some way you've allowed the Holy Spirit to speak with you through this book, through this life, through your prayer time. Give joyously and thankfully. But let me be honest with you, and this isn't a threat, it's a reality. If we continue to give less service hours to the church, I'm left with canceling ministries because people are burning up and burning out. And it's killing people spiritually who are holding on mightily to the tradition of the church. And there's times in which we need to just let it go. Because I sense in the church every time I say, let's try this, something new, all you hear is, oh gosh, there's more. More ministry. I think it's a roadblock for our leadership team to envision a future because we hold so tightly to the traditions of the past. We've always done this. And I tend to ask the question, why? And when we don't have a good answer, I'm okay with letting it go. Because when I let it go, then there is opportunity for something new to arise. For us, in a maybe more culturally relevant way today, to reach those people who don't exist. who aren't here because they don't know Christ. And we don't do it so we can have more people so we can keep the ministries going. We do it because the greatest gift we've ever received, the moment of transformation and change in our life, has come from that moment of saying, yes, yes. And in that moment, if we are unwilling to submit, to put our agenda aside and to let it be God's agenda, then we have crucified him all over again. There's some of you I'm looking at who can't say no, and I'm not talking to you. But our life is a life in action, in response to the super because of our life is that cross and an empty tomb. And that makes all the difference in the world and in our lives. That allows us and encourages us to be changed and new people, first and foremost in our heart and in our attitude. I am beloved. That's so countercultural to the message today. You are loved beyond all measure of what you ever can think, know, or imagine. We all have a place and a role in God's kingdom of building. And we need to come together now more than ever. We need to start getting into this book, not for the knowledge, to fulfill the argument of the place in which we have, but to say to God, God, what is it you'd have me know today? What challenge do you have for me today? What way do you have for me today to demonstrate my faith and trust and hope in you? Speak to me. Forget what the others think. I want you to define what our life together means. And if God sends a different message to a friend, a neighbor, a person sitting across the Bible study, your pastor, or anyone else, it's okay. I'm not serving them. I'm serving the Lord. And let's celebrate that, shall we? I was tempted this morning to pass out service sheets, but that's just a guilt trip. So I'm going to ask Danny to put it online this week. There are a lot of ways that you can put your faith in action. But if you're standing on the sidelines, that's not, I believe, the life God called you to. It's time to re-engage, to get back into this life. Not because Pastor Joe tells you to, not because this is going to be canceled if we don't, because of the one who gave everything. I wish you were close enough this morning to see Willow's face when I tried to wash her feet. Because it's a reminder to me there's nothing my Savior won't do for me. What about me? He didn't put conditions on your salvation. He asked you 2 words. Follow me. The praise band's going to come forward this morning because they're sharing of their gifts for us.